And now onto our dinosaur of the day, Miragaia, which is getting an update. This is a request from Dion Sukas via our Patreon and Discord, so thanks. There was a recent study, the latest study on Miragaia, that found that the species Miragaia longicollum was a synonym of Dacentrurus, and Dacentrurus was named first, and that another Miragaia species, Miragaia longispinus, is actually Alcovasaurus.
I didn't realize there was Miragaia, longicollum, and longispinus.
Yes.
That is a little rough.
So there's been a lot of papers on all three of these dinosaurs. So I'm going to go through each of them separately, and then we'll talk about the latest study that kind of both splits and lumps.
Okay.
But first, a bit about stegosaurs, because we're keeping that stegosaur theme going, because Miragaia was a stegosaur, as was Dacentrurus and Alcovasaurus. So stegosaurs, they're known for their plates and the spines on their backs and necks and tails. Again, they lived in the Middle Jurassic to Early Cretaceous, and they've been found in North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America. The first stegosaur fragments were found in the 1840s, and the first stegosaur skeletons were found and described in the 1870s in North America and Europe. And most stegosaurs are known from partial skeletons or fragments, which is too bad because they look pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe they were really tasty, though.
Oh, maybe. So I'll start with Dacentrurus because it was named first. And we did cover this dinosaur back in episode 252. We've got some updates here. So it was a stegosaur that lived in the late Jurassic and maybe the early Cretaceous of what is now Europe. It was the first stegosaur ever found and named, Dacentrurus armatus. It was named by Richard Owen in 1875, although at the time he named it Omosaurus. The genus name Omosaurus means upper arm and refers to its robust humerus. So originally it was Omosaurus, but then later it became Stegosaurus armatus, named by Richard Lydecker in 1890, and then it got renamed in 1902 as Dacentrurus. And it was renamed by Frederick Augustus because Omosaurus was already in use for a non-dinosaur.
Ah, I see. Okay. So we don't have to worry about Stegosaurus being a junior synonym and everybody having to call it Omosaurus from now on.
Yes.
That's good.
Omosaurus was a whole other thing. And, well, actually what happened with Richard Lydecker tried to solve the naming issue by renaming it to Stegosaurus armatus, but he didn't realize that Marsh had already named Stegosaurus armatus in 1877.
Oh, weird.
Yep. As for Omosaurus, the type species of Omosaurus is Omosaurus perplexus, and it was named by Joseph Leidy in 1856. It's now a dubious reptile, but lived in the late Triassic in what is now North Carolina in the US. And it was named based on teeth, vertebrae, ribs, and an osteoderm, which has been lost. The teeth were straight, cone-shaped, and pointed. Leidy thought that Omosaurus was a marine reptile and that the fossils might be referable to an animal that was already named.
You do get a lot of cone-shaped teeth in the ocean, so that makes sense.
Yeah. And then later he thought it was a crocodilian, but now it's thought to be possibly a phytosaur and also maybe a nomum dubium. Back to Omosaurus armatus, that was named in 1875 and then again later became Dacentrurus. That was named based on a skeleton found in Swindon, England. And the genus name, Dacentrurus, means tail full of points.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And the species name armatus means armed, and it refers to the large spike that Owen thought was on the upper arm. Now, Omosaurus / Dacentrurus was kind of a wastebasket taxon. That happens a lot to dinosaurs named in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of species were named, but now only Dacentrurus armatus is considered to be valid.
So there's Dacentrurus armatus and Stegosaurus armatus?
Yes.
Oh, that's confusing.
Well, Stegosaurus armatus was a Bone Wars dinosaur, and the type specimen might be dubious.
Uh-oh.
But we're not talking about Stegosaurus today. Anyway, Miragaia longicollum may be a junior synonym of Dacentrurus armatus. I'll get to that in a minute. But Dacentrurus, the holotype, is incomplete, which made things extra confusing. That also tends to be the case with wastebasket taxon. Dacentrurus is estimated to be 26 to 30 feet, or about 8 to 9 meters long, and weigh up to 8 tons. And it had a broad gut, short hind limbs, so short legs, and relatively long forelimbs. It also had 12 neck bones and spines on the tail, and it probably had 2 rows of small plates on its neck and 2 rows of long spikes on the tail. The fossils were first found in 1874 in a clay pit in lumps of hardened clay. The holotype includes parts of the pelvis, back and tail vertebrae, a right femur, and some loose vertebrae.
Well, that's not bad.
Yeah. They also found a nearly complete left arm, parts of the leg, a right neck plate, and a left tail spike. So it was found in Swindon, and this Swindon stegosaur is on display at the Natural History Museum in London. Although...
Not Sophie?
It's not Sophie, so it might not be as prominent.
Yeah. The other stegosaur.
Casts of the bones are probably going on display at the Swindon's new museum next year in 2025, so that's pretty cool. Fossils of Dacentrurus have been found in England, France, Spain, and Portugal. Many of them were fragmentary. There's also an egg referred to Dacentrurus found in Portugal that's about 125 millimeters long.
It's about 5 inches.
Mm-hmm. And that was found associated with stegosaur bones. I like when we can tell where the egg comes from.
Yeah, or probably in this case, because you don't have the little stegosaur embryo in it to really be sure.
True. Multiple stegosaurs were found over the years, including a partial skeleton in 1942 from Pedras Moetas in Portugal, which led to more interest in looking for fossils and dinosaurs in Portugal, so that's pretty cool. There's one skeleton that was thought to be a sauropod, Astrodon pusillus, but a later study in 1981 found it to be a juvenile stegosaur. I guess I could see how that might happen.
They're big herbivores, I guess.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Long-ish necks.
Yeah. I mean, they're all named longicollum, apparently, so.
Well, Miragaia did have a very long neck. But anyway, in 1991, Peter Galton redescribed all the stegosaur fossils found and referred most of them to Dacentrurus armatus. And then in 2008, Susanna Maidment found that only the holotype was Dacentrurus armatus, and most of the named species were Nomina dubia.
So there wasn't enough unique about them to justify a species or genus name.
At least at that time, because people have since changed their minds. Stegosaur vertebrae found in Spain were described as Dacentrurus armatus in 2013, and they helped show some variation in Dacentrurus. And in 2021, fossils from the Early Cretaceous of what is now France, parts of the brain case, vertebrae, and ribs, were assigned to Dacentrurus. Just to recap, there are a lot of stegosaur fossils found in Europe that have been referred to Dacentrurus.
It's a good name meaning, but saying Dacentrurus is a little marble-mouthy.
It is. It's not quite as easy to say as Miragaia, which
or Stegosaurus
came along next. Yeah, and actually you've got Dacentrurus, Stegosaurus, and Miragaia. Well, not so much Miragaia anymore. Those are the 3 stegosaurs of Europe from the Jurassic. So before Miragaia, almost all stegosaur specimens found in Portugal and Spain were classified as Dacentrurus armatus. And we did cover Miragaia back in episode 116, but, it was time for an update.
It's been like 8 years.
Well, and also new studies have come out. Miragaia was a stegosaur that lived in the late Jurassic in what is now Portugal, found in the Laurentian Formation, as well as Wyoming in the US, found in the Morrison Formation. This is not according to the latest study. So again, we're keeping the 3 stegosaurs separate for now. It was named in 2009 by Octavio Mateus, Susanna Maidment, and Nikolai Christensen. Being a stegosaur, it looked somewhat like Stegosaurus with plates on its neck, but it had a much longer neck, and it had spikes on the back.
Yeah, it's sort of famous for having the plates in the front and then transitioning to spikes halfway through. I've seen quite a few toys of Miragaia. I think it's one of the more popular stegosaurs.
I think the thing it's mostly known for, though, is its long neck. Because most stegosaurs had short necks for their bodies, but Miragaia had the longest known neck of any stegosaur with at least 17 neck bones.
Yes. It was long for a stegosaur, but not compared to like a sauropod, even the early sauropodomorphs.
Kinda. It had more neck bones than many sauropods.
Yeah, but I mean, giraffes and us have the same number of neck vertebrae. There's more to it than just counting the vertebrae.
That's true. It also had 8 more neck bones than the ancestors it evolved from, basal thyreophorians and ornithischians.
That is significant. Basically doubled the number of vertebrae.
Yeah.
Maybe it was real flexible neck.
Well, some of its neck bones used to be part of the upper back, but it evolved to function like neck bones.
Oh, interesting.
The long neck may mean that it could browse for food that other herbivores couldn't reach, or maybe it was used to attract mates. Miragaia was estimated to be about 20 to 21 feet or 6 to 6.5 meters long and weigh about 2 tons. It walked on all fours, had a small head, and a long tail that ended in spikes. It was thought to have shoulder spines, but later that was found to be part of the tail. So it had these 2 pairs of long tail spines, as well as a pair of triangular plates that ran down its neck, and a beak with no teeth at the tip of it. And it had a notch in the tip of the snout that was shaped like a W when you're looking at it from above. The type species is Miragaia longicollum. And there's 2 species, so longicollum, but also Miragaia longispinus, although the second species is now considered to be Alcovasaurus. The genus name Miragaia is after the parish in Porto, Portugal, and the geologic unit where the fossils were found. And Miragaia means wonderful goddess of the earth.
I was wondering if it was the same Gaia that you hear about all the time.
Mm-hmm. And it is. And the species name longicollum means long neck in Latin. The holotype's a nearly complete front half of a skeleton with a partial skull. It includes most of the snout, parts of the jaws, 15 neck bones, back vertebrae, ribs, shoulder bones, most of the arms, and 13 bony plates plus a spike.
Nice.
The fossils were found while they were building a road between the villages Miragaia and Sobral.
So it could have been Sobralosaurus or...
Yeah, but I guess they're going for the geologic unit too.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Unfortunately, the back half of the skeleton was probably destroyed during construction.
Oh.
But that's like 2 sides of the coin, right? Because if it wasn't for the construction, they might not have found it at all.
Yeah, very true.
The fossils were excavated in August 1999 and 2001. And based on histology, this specimen would have been skeletally mature sometime between 21 to 25 years old. There was a juvenile found in the same location as the holotype too, and that includes 2 partial back vertebrae and a partial pelvis. For a while, the holotype of Miragaia was thought to be Dacentrurus. And in the past, Miragaia longicollum has been known as Dacentrurus. And there's been debate over the years as to whether Miragaia is valid. In 2010, Alberto Cobos and others said that all the unique features of Miragaia were on the parts of the skeleton that were missing from the Dacentrurus holotype found in England, but they lived at the same time, and that in the bones that did overlap, the few that did, they looked the same.
Uh-oh.
So they suggested Miragaia was a junior synonym of Dacentrurus. And then in 2019, Francisco Costa and Octavio Mateus found Miragaia longicollum to be valid when they described a specimen that was found back in 1959, but it wasn't prepared until between 2015 to 2017. And that one is the most complete dinosaur found in Portugal, and it includes parts of the front and back half of the skeleton and tail bones.
Okay, nice.
The 2019 study also said that Alcovasaurus was a second species of Miragaia longispinus. So we went from it's Dacentrurus to no, there are 2 species of Miragaia. But then, 2024, this year, very recently, Sergio Sanchez Fenoyosa, Fernando Escaso, and Alberto Cobos found Miragaia longicollum to be a junior synonym of Dacentrurus and for Alcovasaurus longispinus to be valid. But again, I will get into that after I tell you a little bit more about Miragaia and Alcovasaurus. So going back to the 2019 study, they described a recently prepared, pretty complete stegosaur that was found in the Larinha Formation in Portugal, known as MG4863. It had been in storage for a while and not prepared, and there were no field notes about it, so it was only identified by the label Atoua da Baleia, and some of the fossils were mixed in with unprepared material of the holotype of Dracopelta, which is an ankylosaur. But then the fossils were rediscovered in 2009, and as part of a 2015 thesis, they were eventually almost fully prepared and studied, and the fossils of Miragaia were found to be from the same individual. Again, it's the most complete dinosaur described in Portugal, and the most complete stegosaur found in Europe, and one of the most complete stegosaurs found in the world as of 2019. Many of the bones did break or they were crushed or twisted, but it was still pretty well preserved. They found this specimen to be a young adult, not fully grown, based on details in the neck vertebrae and lack of visible sutures. And they called it the Rosetta Stone specimen because with this new specimen, the skeleton of Miragaia was now almost fully known. We were just missing the back and tail osteoderms. They found that this individual, again, MG4863, had the same characters as Miragaia longicollum and could be distinguished from Dacentrurus, so it was referred to Miragaia longicollum. It had 4 parts of sacral ribs, which in some stegosaurs has been suggested to indicate males, and that 5 pairs were more likely females. But the number of vertebrae fused together to form the sacral rod varies in stegosaurs, so it's not clear if this specimen's actually male.
So basically, the number of fused vertebrae between the hips was a little bit different.
Yes.
Maybe between males and females. And this one had the male number.
Yes. 4 versus 5. It also had 45 tail vertebrae.
Nice.
And large spines over most or the whole of its tail. So based on this specimen and the holotype of Miragaia, that 2019 study found a lot of detailed features, 29 characters, that were different from Dacentrurus, and they said that the 2 dinosaurs were separate and valid. And that specimen now, that Rosetta Stone Miragaia, is on display at the Lisbon Geology Museum. And then that 2019 study also found a lot of similarities between Miragaia and Alcovasaurus longispinus, which is why they renamed Alcovasaurus longispinus as Miragaia longispinus, and how we ended up for a while with Miragaia being on 2 continents.
I see. Okay. Because they were 2 different species of the same genus, not the exact same species on 2 continents.
Right. Yeah, because you got one species, longicollum, found in Europe, and then the other, longispinus, found in the US, North America. So that brings me to Alcovasaurus. That was a stegosaur that lived in the late Jurassic in what is now Wyoming in the US, found in the Morrison Formation. It's estimated to be about 21 feet or 6.5 meters long and weigh almost 4 tons or maybe up to 5 tons. It had a sacrum connected by 6 pairs of sacral ribs, compared to other stegosaurs that had 4 or 5. And it had a flexible tail. The longest spike on its tail was 34 inches or 86 centimeters long, but the point was broken, so it may have been up to almost 39 inches or 99 centimeters long.
That is very long. That's also only the bone part, so if you add a keratin covering onto that, which it almost certainly had, you've got like a full-on spear.
Oh, yes. Going. Watch out for that tail spike. The fossils were found back in 1908. It was a partial skeleton near Alcova in Wyoming. They were described in 1914 by Charles Whitney Gilmore as Stegosaurus longispinus. So it's gone through a lot of names. Miragaia longispinus, Alcovasaurus longispinus. Before that, it was Natronosaurus. Before that, it was Kentrosaurus, and then before that, Stegosaurus. The name Natronosaurus didn't stick because it was published in a self-published ebook that didn't have an ISSN. So, anyway,
wasn't official enough.
Not official enough. The fossils include 42 vertebrae, part of the pelvis, the right femur, several ribs, and tail spines. The type specimen, unfortunately, of Alcovasaurus was damaged in the late 1920s when water pipes at the University of Wyoming burst, and there was some water damage. It was thought to be lost, but there's still a right femur and plaster casts of the tail spikes, as well as photos, so that's something. And in 2016, Peter Galton and Kenneth Carpenter re-examined the photos and the fossils, and that's when they named it the new genus Alcovasaurus.
Okay, so it was named based on pictures because they don't have much of anything left.
And the right femur and the casts of the tail spikes. They also referred a large round spike base to Alcovasaurus, which was lost, but there is a cast that was found in the 1990s.
Must have been quite a flood to almost destroy a whole Stegosaurus skeleton.
Yeah, it's too bad.
He's at 42 vertebrae. That's a lot.
Yeah. Plus the tail spines.
Mm-hmm.
So the type species was named in 2016 Alcovasaurus longispinus. The genus name refers to Alcova, Wyoming, and the species name longispinus means long spine.
Yep.
But again, then just 3 years later, we had that study that found it to be Miragaia longispinus instead of Alcovasaurus longispinus.
So it wasn't known for a long neck and not that kind of spine, a long spine as in a long...
Tail spine.
Yeah, spike.
Yeah, a spike. And then 5 years later, that brings me to this most recent study from this year, which was published in the Zoological Journal of the Linnaean Society. And I want to thank Sergio for sending us the paper. Thank you so much, because that kind of kicked off this whole segment. The gist is that Miragaia longicollum is now Dacentrurus armatus, and Miragaia longispinus is back to Alcovasaurus longispinus.
So they axed Miragaia completely.
Yes, and that means that the stegosaurs of the late Jurassic of Europe are now just Dacentrurus and Stegosaurus. So how did we get here? Well, there's a new stegosaur specimen from San Cristobal site in Teruel, Spain, found in the Villar del Arzobispo formation. The fossils were found in situ, which is always exciting, and it's one individual. It was discovered in 2005 and then partially excavated in 2007, and then it was taken to a museum. More bones were later excavated and prepared, but they remain on site. They're part of this museum and tourist project called Dinosaur Route. So that means some of the fossils are in the field, and researchers and visitors can see it in this permanent exhibit. It's covered by a protective building. It means if you want to see this stegosaur, you can.
Those are always fun to go see when you can.
Yeah.
Sort of like Dinosaur National Monument, but they got their own going in Spain now.
Yeah. As for the fossils that they prepared, those include 10 back vertebrae, several ribs, bones from the sacrum, which are around the lower back, bones from the hips, and a thigh bone and shin bone, the femur and tibia. In the study, the team re-examined all known specimens of Dacentrurus and Miragaia, including the new specimen. So there's 11 individuals in all.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And this study described all the fossils in detail and then compared them also to other stegosaurs. So like I said, Miragaia has been debated before, and even the authors who described Miragaia later said that it could be Dacentrurus of some sort of species.
Oh, I didn't realize that this was always in the cards, potentially.
Yeah. Miragaia was established as a separate species from Dacentrurus because there just weren't enough overlapping fossils found, so you couldn't really compare the two dinosaurs. And because of this, the authors of this newest 2024 paper said that that makes things uncertain. And they also said that the few fossils that do overlap look the same. So this new specimen is known as CT28. It has features seen in Dacentrurus specimens and Miragaia specimens, so it helps fill in the gaps and answer questions. Maybe that makes it Rosetta Stone 2 or something. They found that some of the features that made Miragaia unique were due to individual variation and could be affected by the position of vertebrae being misidentified, like where in the series it was located, as well as things just happening in the fossilization process that distorted the bones.
Yeah, those are two big problems.
Yes.
Because when you're talking about a neck versus a back vertebrae, and you were saying, especially in Miragaia, it looked like these back vertebrae turned into neck vertebrae, and if you're classifying them differently, then
well,
it's not going to be a unique neck anymore.
They do still say it's got at least 17 neck vertebrae.
Okay, cool.
They did find a few examples of individual variation among all the specimens. For example, there's 4 sacral vertebrae in the holotype of Dacentrurus, but there's 5 sacral vertebrae in other individuals. That's not unusual since it's seen in other stegosaurs, including Stegosaurus, Stenops, and Kentrosaurus. The authors did say that more specimens are needed, so need more fossils to help further clarify. But there is still unpublished material which can give more insights. They did update the features that make Dacentrurus, and they found that there are 10 unique features based on the holotype and the referred specimens, and that includes details in the tail bones, for example, having short neural spines, as well as details in the pelvic area, having at least the 17 neck bones, the tip of the snout being drawn into a point, and other details in the neural spines and vertebrae. They also found that there were fewer similarities between Alcovasaurus and Miragaia than Miragaia and Dacentrurus, especially with this new CT28 specimen. And they found unique features in Alcovasaurus, so now it's considered to be a separate genus. it makes Alcovasaurus valid again. So that's how we got to now we've just got Dacentrurus and Alcovasaurus. No more Miragaia, according to the latest paper.
Because they found a new, really complete individual, which at first it was like, oh, look at this really complete Miragaia. And then upon closer inspection, it was like, wait a second, that doesn't look that much like Miragaia. Or that Miragaia looks a little bit too much like Dacentrurus.
Yes. Well, I don't know what their initial thoughts were, just the conclusions. So yeah, now we know a lot more about these stegosaurs.